Welcome to Yoga for Health and Resilience. This 10-week series of 90-minute classes is offered through Yoga X, which is a special initiative in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences in the School of Medicine at Stanford University. This evidence-based protocol is designed by Dr. Christiane Brems, who is clinical faculty and the program director at Yoga X. My name is Gino Carvalho, and I am the program manager. And it is my great privilege, my honor. I'm so grateful to guide you through this practice. So today we'll start with an opening centering. You'll want to have a few yoga blocks today for sure. Definitely a blanket or maybe a bolster for our final resting shape, perhaps. A strap might be nice, and that wall space that we tend to use will also be nice to have. Maybe take a moment to consider those resources and gather them. Know where they are. Know that you'll always have those choices. And take a moment to consider your seat. As we begin to settle into this present moment, in this place, in this amazing community. So just notice if you've considered a chair, perhaps just noticing how to connect to that chair. Is there a back on that chair? Do you want to connect to that, or do you want to hold yourself upright? If you're on yoga blocks, just noticing how they might best support a sense of grounding. Taking a moment to consider your seat after these 9 weeks, knowing that you have your own system, your own wisdom, your own experience to rely on. And perhaps along with some of these suggestions, these invitations, you can guide yourself to something that feels very auspicious in this present moment. You take a moment to connect yourself to all your layers of experience, to all of your koshas. Taking a moment to connect yourself to yourself in this present moment, in this space, in this community. Perhaps just taking a moment to consider the physical body, the physical experience, and how perhaps there's an invitation to ground to the earth. Maybe notice the support or stabilization of the spine. Maybe that happens through some type of scan. Maybe you have your own way of doing that. Is it something that's from the bottom up, or maybe from the top down? Perhaps it's a scan from the outside in or from the inside out. And as you connect with this physical experience, just taking a moment to gently bring your awareness to your vital self, noticing the breath, perhaps noticing qualities of the breath that have come to serve you in your connection. Maybe it's the length or the texture. Perhaps it's the sound or the rhythm of the breath cycle. Maybe it's simply just noticing when you're breathing in, noticing when you're breathing out. And perhaps gently inviting some awareness to the mind, and maybe how the mind is showing up this morning, and just meeting those mind states however they are in this present moment. Just checking in with thoughts and emotions and inviting the mind to be present. Knowing that these thoughts may come, they may go, they may persist, or perhaps offering an invitation to continue to meet them exactly as they are. Taking a moment to tune in to this deeper inner wisdom that guides the observations of the physical body, that experience, the vital self, the experience of the breath, and the way we meet the mind. This observer that is constantly witnessing our connection to all of our layers, our holism and our integration. And this inner wisdom that allows us to rest in the faith of this practice, the system, the sequence, these behaviors that we've developed within this practice. Perhaps maybe this feeling of wholeness, this feeling of connectedness, maybe within that there is a sense of joy, this seed of joy. Maybe it's the joy of just feeling whole, or the joy of feeling connected, individually or collectively. Perhaps the joy of knowing you are a part of a larger community, knowing that you are part of a greater whole that is interconnected, interdependent, co-regulating, co-arising, knowing that we are never alone, and perhaps a sense of gratitude in knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be, regardless of the obstacles, no matter of the challenges. Just inviting a sense of the wisdom of grounding into this moment, into the integration, remembering the practice and the trust that has been built with the persistence and repetition of returning to the mat, returning to your practice over this time that we've shared together. I invite you to bring your hands to your heart if that feels inviting for you, and perhaps closing your eyes or bowing your head if that feels auspicious. I'm just taking a moment to an intention for our practice today. Perhaps it's something that you've been working on over this time that feels accessible. Or perhaps if there's nothing that's arising right now, just leaving a little space for something that could arise in our time together this morning. And with an inhale, breathing that in. And with your exhale, sending it out. And I invite you to lower your hands and lift your gaze if your eyes were closed. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to session 10. Wow, what a journey. These last 10 weeks have really just flown by. And it's been amazing to see the interaction with the community, as we said, and also to be in this journey with our whole community of students in our 200-hour program and our 300-hour program. We will continue to offer, even though this is the last of our 10 series, we'll continue to offer classes at this time. So next week, we'll start with kind of a new theme. We'll have the name of the class slightly changed, and that will be Integrated Holistic Anatomy. So just like these last 9 weeks, we will continue to build on the time that we spend together through all of these themes, integrating all of these things that we have explored in the last 10 weeks, continuing our journey on for another 10 weeks of practice and probably more weeks beyond there. So you'll be getting some more information, and we look forward to seeing you next week. But this series has been an expression of integrated holistic yoga designed to take us through all aspects of our integration and our holism individually and collectively. And today, in this 10th series, we get a chance to really take a moment to reflect on that journey and all of the strength and the health and resilience that we have built over this time on this practice, continuing to return to our mat. So today is really about honoring all of those themes that we explored, whether it was through just coming to sit at the mat, maybe it was something that that resonated with you through the movement practice. Perhaps it was something that had a specific impact on you with the breathing practice. Maybe there was something in our stillness. Or maybe it was something that happened taking this practice off the mat as you continued to cycle through this with intention week after week, with also an invitation to incorporate this into a lifestyle practice, into this place where, which is the whole point of our practice, right? To integrate the teachings, the experiences here into our experiences out in our community, out in our relationships, how we show up in our social systems, how we show up in the roles that we play in our career, our jobs, how we take leadership roles, and how we follow, if we follow, where we follow, how we connect. So we have cultivated these skills over the last 10 weeks. And today we'll kind of give them a framework and give them some names. And the first strength that we will explore is a conviction. This idea of having a faith in the path, a faith in this system, your system that you've created through these behaviors, through the relationships that have been affected by these behaviors that we're cultivating on the mat. A system that makes sense and a system that has meaning and provides purpose. And it allows us to feel fully alive along this path because you identify with this firmly held belief in this practice, this conviction that comes from the fruits of your practice. So it's a practice that allows you to cultivate compassion for yourself, which allows you to have those benefits show up in your relationships, cultivating an awareness and a trust in your inner wisdom, realizing that every moment is an opportunity to reconnect with this work, with this practice. And through that cycle, being able to develop this trust in this practice and having a conviction and a faith in that cycle, in that practice. And as we repeat that cycle and continue to build this trust, there's another strength there that we can acknowledge. And that is a sense of persistence, this energy, this passion, this dedication to return to the practice. We fail at this all the time. We stray from our path all the time, right? That's why we continue to come, and those opportunities, those failures, quote unquote, those moments that we stray from the path, those are amazing opportunities for learning, right? Those teaching moments for us to come back to our practice and grow, right? To have that perception reveal itself in the context of how we can work through these things and bring them through the frameworks of our practice. And why do we fail? Why do we stray? Because it's really hard, right? Because there are so many barriers, there are so many obstacles, there are so many things in the system outside of this system that are not necessarily aligned. And as we continue to come back to the mat and practice in this way, it's not just a practice that is being internalized and then left on the mat. It's something that's going out and meeting these barriers and it's meeting these obstacles, and there's not that alignment, so there's always this need to come back to the mat and revisit what's happening in that integrated exchange that happens between working on the mat and bringing your work off of the mat. So there's an amazing persistence that resonates in this dedication to return to face the challenge, whether those challenges are the challenges we're meeting on the mat or those challenges that we're meeting out into the world. And we have this opportunity there, right, in our practice to continue to cultivate a sense of mindfulness. That's our next strength, right? The strength is this ability to come back and remember our practice, right? To remember and become more and more aware of our choice in this present moment and remembering to be present in the moment. To be able to take that time to avoid the distractions and the constant multitasking, all of those things that pull us out of this system that we cultivate, that are often things that are coming at us with information and requests and choices outside, off the mat in the world. But taking this moment on the mat to see if there are discerning choices that we can make off the mat that would allow us to not dilute our attention and to have some type of consistency from our practice and our lifestyle. And to be able to cultivate the presence in this present moment with a distinction to remember, to attend, to being present in the present moment, whether or not it's in the practice or whether we are out in our lifestyle practice. And that is a cultivation of focus, a continual, perpetual cultivation of focus and concentration, this full attention that's rooted in our connectedness and our ability to experience this integration, right? So that's our next strength, integration, right? This concentrated integration that is a strength of our wholeness and our integration, which allows us to show up fully in our community, which allows us to show up fully in the entire web of life, honoring that we are interdependent, that we are co-arising, that we are codependent with this system. Excuse me. And knowing with that interdependence and honoring that connection to the greater web of life, bringing that back to our practice and connecting our awareness to this experience of all of our koshas, where we're cultivating the awareness of our inner wisdom, that intuition that cultivates a compassion for ourselves, which fuels the way we show up for others. And that is what integrated holistic yoga is really all about, staying connected in all of our layers, and wisdom being one of those layers, but also one of these strengths. And this is the final strength that we'll put a name to and honor today in our practice. So that wisdom of being able to be present in the moment and allowing ourselves to be guided to make very discerning choices. So wisdom or discernment, this ability to kind of draw on all four of these other strengths, which all play in on each other, right? They're all things that we're working on in the practice and that we're taking off of the mat and that we're constantly in reviewing in this effort to experience our integration, right? So by collecting ourselves and our awareness and our wisdom and our compassion, We allow ourselves the opportunity to make these discerning choices on how to react in that moment between stimulus and response, right? And realizing that through our wisdom, that our thoughts and our words and our actions have impact, and we can make wise choices that create positive outcomes and wholesome outcomes that serve the greater good. So today we will explore some of these strengths, which all interconnect and probably have a lot of familiarity with all of the practice that we've done over this last 9 weeks of experience together. So today you'll get a lot of choices in different ways to experience those strengths. And you'll hear these invitations, and they may be something that I am demonstrating and experiencing that you'll be able to see, but perhaps there'll be something different that you would like to explore, rooted in your wisdom, rooted in your experience. So we'll start today by actually standing for our breathing practice. So take a moment to clear your mat if you are sitting on blocks or bolsters, and we'll meet in a standing shape. As you take a moment to find your footprint and arrive on the mat, perhaps take a moment to invite a sense of grounding. Maybe that sense of grounding starts to be an invitation to perhaps pick the toes up and spread the toes, ground the toes, noticing all of the sensations that start to manifest through the physical body, maybe through the sole of the foot, the arches, the metatarsals, the low leg, maybe the upper leg and the glutes, the pelvic floor, rooting down, inviting this grounding, and just noticing perhaps the stability that that provides all the way up through the pelvis into the trunk. And as you ground through the feet, stabilize through the center, maybe just taking a moment to invite a little bit of settling and grounding in the scapula. So maybe that looks like a little bit of shoulder or scapular movement for you, if that might be a rise or fall. Perhaps even like perhaps it's much like picking the toes up and spreading the toes, that you pick the scapula up and spread the scapula and invite the scapula to ground back down. You may even feel that happening in toes and fingers and scapula, upper appendicular, lower appendicular, and also through the trunk as we start to integrate this invitation to ground and integrate this invitation to stabilize. And from the fruits of grounding and stabilizing, perhaps settling and inviting a little sense of expansion. Maybe once finding that grounding, stabilizing, and expanding, just taking a moment to feel a little stillness in the body, but perhaps also noticing the movement in the stillness, noticing the breath. And as you tune in to the grounding of the physical experience and the energy of the breath experience, perhaps inviting a little bit of that attention and focus, I invite you to perhaps bring your palms to heart center. I'll talk you through this breath practice, which is called connection breath. So there is some sequencing here, there's some offering. I will invite you to synchronize with me. That is, again, just an option. You do not have to do it, but there may be something that is more auspicious for you. But consider this community invitation to synchronize with this breath practice. And I'll go through it this first time. We'll have a number of cycles in order for you to synchronize and get to know it. So maybe you'll take a look for the first few. Taking a moment to press the palms together at heart center. And then perhaps on the next inhale, inviting the arms to spread outward and upward, opening up and rising up for a moment, perhaps touching at the top and maybe taking that pause at the top before exhaling down through the center line with clarity and focus, making your way to heart center, perhaps pausing here in mindful remembrance before inhaling once again out to the sides, opening the heart, extending out to the world, extending out to the community that we connect to, and then drawing in, returning back to our center, back to our heart center. Inhaling with persistence, driving upward, moving forward, perhaps pausing at the top, and then slowly at the exhale, expanding back out once again before returning back and meeting in the center. Return, and that is the cycle. So we will continue inhaling, opening out and around, having this expansive feeling as we reach the arms all the way up to the top, perhaps touching at the top, pausing with persistence and bringing in, drawing in through mindfulness in the center line, perhaps pausing in remembrance. Inhaling and opening, connecting to the world and drawing that energy of our connection, maybe pausing in a moment in that connection before coming in again with your exhale, meeting in the center and pausing. Inhale, rising up, pausing at the top before the exhale, one more time, out and around and back to the center. We'll continue this cycle. Inhaling, opening out, stretching outward and upward, rooted down, but expanding up, and a pause at the top. Exhaling and drawing through the center line, meeting at the heart center. Inhale, opening out. And exhaling, drawing back in. Pausing with remembrance, pausing with purpose. Inhale, rising up, perhaps the rise is with the purpose. Pausing at the top and drawing out, down, and back to the center. We'll continue this cycle 2 more times. Inhaling and opening out, perhaps closing your eyes if that feels inviting. If you know the cycle by now, maybe keeping your eyes open is great too. Noticing if you might have an opportunity to experience those pauses. Maybe you're moving a little faster, that's fine. Inhaling and opening. Exhaling, drawing in. Inhaling, rising up with purpose. Exhaling, opening out, stretching out with wisdom, with discernment, coming back in remembrance. Inhale, opening and connecting to the world. Taking a pause at the top. Drawing down through the center. Inhale and opening this horizontal, opening the heart center. And with the exhale, coming back, grounding down, stabilizing, and extending up. Slowly inviting the arms to fall. Bringing the hands back to heart center. One more time. And just taking a moment to feel that sensation of the breath practice and the arm movements that associated with it. Perhaps keeping your hands at heart center, maybe your hands against the chest if that feels nice, or let your arms fall down to the sides if that feels better for you. Take a moment to maybe come back to the intention that you set at the beginning of class. And from here, we'll take a moment to find perhaps a slightly wider base as we invite a little bit more movement in the spine in our standing shape. So take a moment to ground down, consider this stabilizing again, and inhale to rise up with the arms, and consider a side bend here. So with a side bend, you could consider a clasp of the right, my right hand, I'm gonna clasp the right wrist for this reach over to the right. For you, it might be a slightly different clasp. Maybe it's the thumbs. Maybe there's no clasp. Maybe there's just fingers touching. And then coming back to center and exploring that on the other side. Taking a moment to invite that wisdom of all these experience over the last 9 weeks, and also being very mindful and present in this moment to take a look at exactly what base makes sense, what pace, tempo, what range of motion. You might be moving a lot faster than me because your wisdom, because your inner teacher, because your experience tells you that that's a discerning choice. You may be moving slower and perhaps taking a moment to really ground and root down and persist in a shape, because that mindfulness, that remembrance is informing a very wise choice for you. But just taking a few more side movements to open up the spine. Consider how you would like to place your feet. Maybe you've changed that from the first option, knowing that you can always change your shape. You can always make a different choice. And just returning to our center for a moment and allowing the hands to fall down at the sides. Taking a moment in stillness once again to just notice how that side bending is resonating in the body. And for the next move, we will invite an inhale that sweeps, I'll start with my left arm, into a bit of a reach, a bit of a rotation. You'll notice that it's really not just my arm. I've taken my whole hip, my knee, my heels off the ground, and I'm reaching up and around, inviting a little bit of this kind of circular circumduction rotation, but it's really the whole body is being invited in this. And this is something that is a bit of a complicated move, and it might take a few cycles to start to gain that wisdom of that experience. Maybe you're starting with a slightly smaller movement. But this is an invitation to rotate, but also invite some extension of the arm. Take a moment to notice this invitation and see if it resonates with you. Notice if there might be something else that you would like to try. Again, consider how to ground, but also invite a fluidity in this movement, rooted in the wisdom, rooted in discerning decision-making. And see if you can find that invitation to focus, continuing to bring in the integration through all the layers of experience. Maybe your movement has started to evolve into something a little different from that first try. We'll take a few more breath cycles with this invitation to rotate, this invitation to open and turn at your pace, rooted in your experience. before arriving back in our mountain shape. Perhaps one more time, checking in with the footprint and grounding. Notice the energy body and the breath. Just noticing how the mind states are showing up, perhaps revisiting the intention. We'll do one more invitation in the standing shape. We'll invite a few cactus moves. So perhaps forward and back with the cactus. You could be bringing your forearms. You could invite an entire rounding into a cat-cow. Perhaps opening with your kind of goalpost cactus shape and closing with the elbows coming together and the forearms coming together. You might feel like it's an invitation to continue this upward, this persistence of reaching upward and bringing the shoulder blades back down. Let your inner teacher, let your inner wisdom guide you through the shapes that serve you best in this practice. Sometimes that choice might feel like a bit of a burden. Maybe there's something that is there as we continue to stay very present and persistent, inviting that experience of integration to guide us to that sense of wisdom. And just taking a few more breaths in this forward and back or up and down cactus shape that flexes the spine forward and opens the spine. And once again, slowly returning back to the standing shape, back to our Tadasana. Grounding, stabilizing, and perhaps inviting a sense of expansion. Just noticing the effect of that opening practice. From there, we'll just gently make your way into a lunged shape. So I'm just going to step the left foot back and gather the props, just the 2 yoga blocks for sure. You may also like to have a blanket to soften the floor for the back knee. So we'll come to this lunge shape. And take a moment to ground once again through the front leg, ground also through the back leg, which might be through the shin, the top of the foot, and the knee. And take a moment to invite that stability of the front femur and the back femur coming into the pelvis. By now, we've taught this lunge quite a bit. Maybe you already have a path that you see that your wisdom is guiding you through. Perhaps it involves a little bit of movement. You can always choose movement or choose stillness, but maybe not just fidget for the sake of fidgeting. And whether you're moving or staying still in this shape, continue to invite that sense of grounding and stabilizing. Stabilizing through the load-bearing limbs that root us down, grounding through the legs, stabilizing through the center, perhaps starting to invite a little bit of expansion. And if it feels inviting, perhaps bringing a little bit more extension into the expression. Maybe there's an arm or two that can raise. Where is the shape that's most wise for your experience this morning? How do you meet that in all your layers, not just the physical layer? And then continue to explore that shape and consider continuing to invite a sense of grounding. And then perhaps invite a sense of expansion through the load-bearing limbs that could potentially invite a sense of a pyramid shape. And just let that shape manifest in the way that is most auspicious for you. So that may mean that you're shifting your feet. Perhaps they're a little bit closer together than they originally were. Perhaps the back knee stays down. You stay in that extended stretch with the front knee extended. Perhaps there's a hamstring sensation, back of the leg. And even here, there could be stillness, or there could be a very intentional flow that allows for you to connect to the energy flow, which might be synchronizing with your breath and your experience. Perhaps you're still grounding through both extremities, but that grounding can take place with a little different articulation, perhaps lifting that front leg or lifting the back heel. Maybe inviting a little sense of expansion from the tailbone to the crown of the head, and that complementary directional line of energy at the top of that triangle. And then once again, perhaps inviting that lunge shape with the back knee up or down. I'm just going to turn so you can see me a little better. But we'll take the blocks. You could use the blocks or not, but invite the right block in and the right foot just outside the block. So we're coming into this kind of lizard shape. It's a little bit wider. You can have the back knee down or you can have the back knee up. Take a moment to perhaps continue to offer that extension through the spine. Notice if the back of the neck might feel a little bit more auspicious with some space. So notice where your sight line is. If you're really looking at the screen, if there's a connection there. And by inviting that sight line perhaps down instead of up, maybe you can start to fold into this shape if that feels nice for you. Perhaps using some blocks. Perhaps inviting the back knee down onto the blanket or leaving the back knee up if that feels okay. Continuing to ground through the front foot. And just noticing when we need to return to the path that is guided by our wisdom, by our wise self, and when we may be bringing a shape or bringing an energy that's less auspicious, knowing that we can change our decision at any point in the practice. Probably noticing if you've held this long lunge for a little while, this low lunge for a while, there might be a little bit of heat there. We'll stay into that shape and I'll show you, we're going to take a transition from this shape. So if the back knee is down, you may consider lifting the back knee, and we're going to turn the toes into the left, maybe spinning the back heel down, and come around to the side of the mat, coming into our wide-legged forward fold. And from this shape, just take a moment to once again ground with this wide base. And from that wide base, take a moment and just notice the front, back, inside and outside of the foot. Perhaps notice if there's an auspicious direction for the foot to point as you begin to ground. And as you ground, notice how the roots stabilize the trunk and what you may or may not decide to do with your limbs. Perhaps the arms can lift off the blocks, or they just stay maybe a little lighter. Maybe they just easily fall down onto the blocks. You can stay in this static, wide-legged shape, or perhaps consider a little external rotation at the foot and the ankle. And if it feels nice, you may play with your gait slightly or a lot, noticing where there might be a place that you want to explore a little longer. And for me, that I really enjoy the depth all the way down. I think it's actually a little bit more work to stay slightly hovered for my joints and my legs. But there is an opportunity to continue to use the blocks to stabilize this gait movement if you're playing with the lateral movement. You'll notice that my right foot is not grounded here. My heel is slightly up, and that's fine. And if you take the hands away, you'll really bring a lot more conviction and challenge into the lateral movement. And let that be guided by the discernment and the wise choices. Perhaps if you've experimented with the side movements, you may decide to settle into a stillness once again, or continue moving if that feels auspicious for you. But taking a block below the head is the next option to perhaps play a little bit with this rotation. Maybe allowing for the right arm to come up while the left arm is down, and maybe just taking the arm simply behind to the sacrum. Once again, just noticing how you can build this shape, rooted down, stabilizing in the trunk, and then perhaps inviting some movement in the limbs. Notice if your sight line, your drishti, your focus, starts to complement whether or not or how you rotate. Maybe just inviting that right shoulder to rise up, noticing how much weight you're putting down on the block, what height of the block makes sense for your experience right here, right now. Whether or not you would like to extend. Perhaps staying focused on the ground. Maybe staying focused in a way that is stabilizing through the spine. Or maybe offering the sight line up, knowing that each one of those is a very different experience. And then just as intentionally, just as discerning as you came into the shape, slowly begin to make your way back. And then gently beginning to settle the pelvis and the spine after that rotation. And we'll gently make our way back to that front of the mat orientation. Perhaps using the strength of the legs, maybe turning through the feet nice and slow. With that slow movement, there's a little more information, maybe a little bit more discernment, maybe a little more kindness. The option is still there to drop the left knee down. And then perhaps invite that grounding, lifting the heart. And if it's wise to do so, perhaps coming into this warrior one shape. Grounding and meeting that stability at the pelvis that allows for the stability and perhaps even a little bit of expansion. And just let these arm expressions be something that is completely your choice. Noticing exactly what will serve you today in this moment. Feels inviting. You may even start to lead with the heart. Maybe taking a little bit of this humble shape. You can always put that back knee down at any point. It's your choice based on your wisdom. And just notice if the breath energy is suggesting a pace. Maybe if you're talking, you can really feel it. And just as gently as you made your way into the shape, consider a soft landing with that back knee if it's up, and maybe finding your blocks. And once again, from this low lunge shape, we'll just walk the right leg out one more time. And we'll keep this block on the left side for sure. I think you'll be able to see me here. We'll see me on the other side as well if not. But perhaps inviting this kind of lizard shape to play, yeah, I'm gonna move. So we'll play a little bit with the idea of maybe offering this external rotation, this little bit of abduction, maybe even inviting a little bit of the heart opening here. From that place, once again, just noticing if there's a variation in the heights of the blocks, or perhaps if there's a variation in the expression of the arms as you root down, stabilize, and expand. Continuing to invite the wisdom of this experience through the last 9 weeks, but the experiences in all of your life totality that's leading to this present moment, that's allowing you to make a wise choice based on being very present in this moment and staying persistent with the practice and that presence, knowing that if you came into a shape, you'll look to try to offer a similar quality when you come out of it. Gently, perhaps starting to make your way onto your belly. You can come into tabletop. You can come into plank if that feels nice. You can come into a down dog if that is the shape that feels better after that previous movement. Wherever you are, perhaps lowering your knees down first, but eventually making your way down onto your belly. And from here, considering a little heart opening shape, whether it be any of those variations that we played with last week. Maybe it's just a simple invitation to open the heart just a little bit, grounding the back legs, or perhaps maybe even inviting the legs to lift or reaching the arms back. And after a breath or two more in that shape, I invite you to place the hands down and send the hips back to tabletop or child's pose, maybe down dog, if that's what's calling for you. As you begin to transition onto the other side. And as we journey onto this other side, you have a little bit more insight into what we may be doing. So I'll give a little fewer choices in the hope to provide a little bit more autonomy and liberty for you to make those choices, still demonstrating some of the options. So it may feel like the pace changes slightly, and it's possible that we go a little faster on this side, and that's okay. There is some wisdom that we have from the previous experience. And at the same time, this different side has a different story, doesn't it? So honoring that. Continuing to invite the awareness of the trust that you've built in the practice. And that conviction that guides you. Continuing to stay persistent by inviting the mind to come back to the mat, to come back to this present moment if it ever drifts away. Continuing to invite this sense of mindfulness, this remembrance, part of that element I was just referring to about one side kind of informing the other in a way through its interconnectedness, through its co-regulating. This is where we might go outside with the leg, inviting the knee possibly down or up. Do we go in at your own pace? Might feel very different than mine. Perhaps just exploring that lizard from one side to the other, a little bit of a deeper grounded position. So you might invite a little different shape. And then from that lizard shape, perhaps inviting the rotation towards the center and a wide-legged forward fold, grounding, stabilizing, and then considering your options. Maybe something different this time around, knowing that that was self-balancing. Knowing that your blocks may serve a different support, perhaps a little bit of a wide footprint, pointing the toes out. Once again, stabilizing. And allowing the shapes to unfold exactly the way they need to for you in this experience. Continuing to have that reverence of the persistence and the conviction of this practice. It allows us to maybe avoid diluting our attention. Making your way through this sequence. I'm just going to transfer so that you can see me. Left leg. Come into perhaps that warrior one shape. Again, knowing that a different side has a different story, but is still connected to the experience on the other side. Letting your wise teacher, your inner teacher, your wise self, your observer, guide you through these discerning choices, inviting the integration of all the layers of experience. Perhaps playing with this lizard shape, a knee can be down or up. Perhaps play with an arm expression, grounding, stabilizing, and expanding. Taking your time to make your way through that side of the sequence before perhaps making your way to a child's pose or a tabletop or a down dog. And then perhaps inviting your whole self down onto the belly one more time. Inviting a little bit of this heart opening. Playing with the same thing as the other side, or maybe there's a new variation that comes from that wise discernment and that persistence to stay curious, and that persistence to stay present in the moment. And once you've explored that heart opener, perhaps invite a child's pose. Could also be a puppy dog's pose, a tabletop, or maybe this hero's pose if it feels available to you. You can always put a blanket underneath your ankles here. Just take a moment to check in and notice the effect of this slow heat building practice that invited all this experience and exploration of the strengths of the practice. And I'll offer one more shape where we'll take a couple rounds to play with it. We'll start with the wall, and it might feel really nice to have a blanket down for this. And I'll demonstrate first, and then maybe you can try this out and see if there are some other shapes that you'd like to take. But coming onto the shins and the knees toward the wall, inviting this camel preparation. Hopefully you can hear me okay as I talk into the wall a little bit. Sorry, you'll want to have some blocks close by. Perhaps keeping these blocks around the shin ankle area. So I don't always like to stack a block on the blanket, so that might be a little bit wider than that. Just gonna do your best to gauge what is the most supportive for you. I actually would love to have one of those cork blocks that are really stable here. But for a moment, just take a moment to ground, and notice if you can invite the pelvis forward towards the wall, and just simply invite the heart to lift a little bit. And maybe it'll feel nice to have some support with your hands on the back side of the body. And maybe it's the blocks, right? You can find a place for the blocks that makes the most sense for you. And from that shape, grounding, stabilizing, and then inviting the lift. So that's one option. You can go ahead and play with that option if you're looking for something that doesn't involve the wall, because that doesn't appeal to you. Then you can do that same move facing the other way. And maybe there is an added bit of grounding by having a block between the thighs, where it just makes it feel connected and grounded. Your toes can be down, or the tops of the feet can be up. And perhaps, once again, just offering that extension in something that could be asymmetrical even. So it could be grounding, and I could just be lifting from one side. So there's some unilateral forces, or at least asymmetrical forces going on in this. Just be aware of that. And notice how you can auspiciously choose to balance that out with your time and energy in that shape. And if you'd like to play away from the wall and maybe use blocks to invite a little bit of grounded experience with the blocks, you could do this against the wall as well. Maybe inviting a little bit of a lift, and then you decide what to do with your sight line. Maybe keeping your sight line forward. Maybe it feels okay to release your sight line up. That'll really depend on so much of the grounding, so much of how you're stabilizing and supporting underneath, and taking the time to check in with that permission to experiment, to stay persistent and committed to moving with mindfulness and concentration. Yeah, great choices. Nice use of the wall. Yeah, invite the hips to open. Yeah, invite the hands perhaps to provide support behind you. And just see if it's something that will be supported through some static movement, through some stillness, or if there is actual movement. And whatever side you are on, wherever you are with your play, begin to think about coming out of the heart opening and maybe just returning to that seated shape. And if that seated shape doesn't feel comfortable, you can return to a tabletop that can feel really stable. Maybe this is an opportunity to once again check in with your intention, connect with all the layers. And from this place of connection, just take a moment to map out how you might make your way onto your back. You might need to move some of the props that you've played with. And let's add access to a strap once you get there. You make your way to your back. Go ahead and settle and ground into this supine position in any way that makes sense for you. There could be a gentle, abbreviated windshield wiper, just a gentle, subtle movement from side to side with the knees. Perhaps it will feel really nice to extend your legs long. But just take a moment to arrive in this supine orientation. And then mindfully and with discernment, consider bringing the knees towards the chest if that feels inviting, and maybe that's enough right there. And with a strap close by, you could consider using the strap to assist with a happy baby shape. Maybe just bringing the strap around the outsides of the feet. And maybe that will allow you to perhaps feel more grounded in your shoulders and arms and the back of your head. And just meet that engagement, that integration of the upper body and the lower body connecting in this shape. If that feels nice for you, you can just gently have your hands on your knees as an alternative if you don't like that. And if you really like the connection of the hands and the feet, you could invite a happy baby with some type of lock with the peace fingers and the big toe, or maybe if it feels available, you could grab onto the outside, the blades of the feet. You may be noticing that you would like to have a little bit of playful movement here, or your wise decision may be to stay still and just connect to the breath. When you're ready to make a transition, invite a one-legged L shape, perhaps inviting the leg that's not up to root down, and invite that rooting sensation through the whole body, from the heel through the back of the leg, through the back side of the body, all the way to the back of the head. And then considering the strap and the arm engagement. So sometimes we just immediately go into a habit, right? Where we just lock around with a strap. But consider if there is a very intentional attachment to the strap that would engage the arms in a particular way, that will engage the fingers, the wrists, in a similar, well, in a way that we're also asking for the foot to engage with this strap, right? We're also asking our metatarsals to have some say in this. So our metacarpals, so our hand, the bones of our hands and the bones of our feet get to have a connection here. And after connecting with the breath, inviting the mind to be very present, when you're ready and in the way you would like to, consider making a transition to the other side. Doing so very mindfully. Maybe that means with slow pace, curiosity, and intention. Once again, consider that connection with the strap. Consider the sense of grounding through the leg that's down and through the whole back side of the body. And when you feel like you've balanced out that exploration on both sides, begin to transition out of this shape and into your final resting shape. Perhaps taking a moment to gather a bolster for beneath your knees or a blanket under the heels. If you would like to have a bolster under your back or in a reclined position because you know that that's something that's served you through this experience, just take a moment to check into the wise self and make a discerning choice on how you choose to set up your final resting pose based on your wisdom and experience. And as you begin to set up this final resting shape, invite the physical body to begin to surrender to gravity. Maybe just taking a moment to notice the weight of the body. Noticing the points of contact and inviting a sense of surrender. And then begin to invite a sense of surrender in the energy body. Beginning to release any need to over effort in the breath. Trusting in the flow of prana all around you. Knowing that that energy is a reciprocal experience, constantly available, moving through you. Begin to invite a sense of surrender in the mind and emotions. Trusting in the inner wisdom to guide you. Guiding you into the experience of the wise and intuitive self that's very in tuned to this experience of integration. And from this place of intuitive integration, I invite you to consider the image of a tree, of a vibrant, healthy, fruiting and flowering tree. A symbol, a metaphor, an image that is entirely your own. I'm holding this image of this vital, fruiting, flowering tree in your awareness. Gently draw your awareness to the roots of the tree. Just notice how the roots engage with the earth, grounding, perhaps flaring out and anchoring. Notice these roots that provide nourishment, nourishment from the earth's soil, from these microbes, from bacteria. Note that the roots of the tree are a symbol of the ethical practices of yoga. The roots ground the tree the same way that our ethics ground our life, ground our worldview. Roots are nourished by soil, by water, by air, the same way that we are nourished by our community. Continuing to hold the entirety of the tree in your awareness. Gently draw your attention to the trunk. This stable, durable, persistent trunk, sturdy and steadfast. The trunk is the symbol of the lifestyle limb of yoga, representing the stability that our work, that our discipline, that our persistence provides to us and provides to our community. And just as the tree benefits from this sturdy trunk, we benefit from the steadfast commitment to our lifestyle practice. And continuing to hold the entirety of the tree in your awareness, gently draw your attention to the limbs. Notice the limbs reaching outwards into the world, sprawling, bending, twisting, adapting to the elements, adapting to the creatures they support. The limbs represent the movement practice of yoga. Just like the limbs, we resiliently move and adapt to the world with the sturdy support of our inner being. And continuing to hold the entirety of the tree in your awareness. Gently draw your attention to the leaves of the tree. These amazing mechanisms that exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. They absorb light and energy. The leaves of the tree are the symbol of the breath practice of yoga, symbolizing the perpetual exchange, a reciprocity of giving and taking, moving energy through us, around us, constantly exchanging energy, absorbing what is offered to us, and sharing back what we have to offer. Continuing to hold the entirety of the tree in your awareness, gently draw your attention to the bark of the tree. This bark covering the entirety of the tree, the roots, the trunk, the limbs, this protective layer that keeps the tree safe from outside harm. The bark represents the guarding of the senses, a practice that keeps our senses protected from unwholesome stimulation, distraction. The bark draws our energy inward and invites us into our inner being. Continuing to hold the entirety of the tree in your awareness, gently draw your attention to the sap in the tree, this concentrated fluid, this focused energy, dense with nutrients, flowing through the tree, upward and into the entire structure of the tree. The sap in the tree represents the practice of concentration. When we focus our energy to nourish the entirety of our being, to receive the nourishment we cultivate through attention, through focus, to becoming single-pointed, a single-pointed focus with concentration. Continuing to hold the entirety of the tree in your awareness, gently draw your attention to the flowers in the tree, noticing that the flowers flourish from the nourishment of the sap, the concentration of the sap, the protection of the bark, the energy of the leaves, the resilience of the limbs, the stability of the trunk, the nourishment of the roots. All of this allows the flowers to burst forth. This is an inner beauty. The flowers represent the limb of meditation, this inner practice that allows our inner beauty to burst forth, to share our beauty into our relationships, into our community, into our world. It is the flowers that invite the fruits that emerge. These fruits are the culmination of the nourishment of all the elements of the tree. These fruits ultimately serve to nourish others. These fruits represent samadhi. They represent our connection, our union, our integration. The fruits are only there because of the roots' nourishment, because of the steadfastness of the trunk, the resilience of the limbs, the exchange of energy and life force of the leaves, the protection of the bark, the concentration of the sap, nourishing the flowers that allow the fruit to arise. And this is the practice of yoga, a practice of transformation, connection. This is the cycle of life. Eventually, the fruit will fall, and it will nourish another creature. It will nourish another being. It will nourish the soil. And so the cycle continues. You may choose to hold this image of the tree, or perhaps let it fade, as I invite you to surrender to a few moments of silence. Begin to invite an awareness of your outer senses. Perhaps invite the body to engage in any movements that feel auspicious. If that's a stretch or a wiggle or a fidget, just take a moment to embrace a sense of vitality. Perhaps taking a conscious breath in and intentionally releasing. Begin to think about mapping your way to a seated posture. And when you're ready, beginning to very intentionally make your way to that seat in the next 20 seconds. Take all the time you need, and we will gather in a seated position for our closing. And as you make your way to your seated shape, just take a moment to ground once again. Take a moment to stabilize. Maybe invite a little sense of extension, expansion. If it feels inviting, perhaps bringing your hands to heart center, maybe bowing your head if that feels nice. Just taking a moment to notice anything that may have came up in the practice that you would like to take with you. Or perhaps just bringing your awareness back to the intention you set at the beginning of class. And with an inhale, breathing that in. And with an exhale, sharing that out to your community. I invite you to lower your hands and lift your gaze if the eyes were closed. Thank you all for sharing your practice with me this morning or today. It's been a joy and a pleasure to go through this series with you. And if you didn't hear at the beginning of class, we will continue to offer classes with very similar experiences under a different name. Integrated Holistic Anatomy will start next week. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, Gino.
Thank you very much, Gino. It was an amazing practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.